They went 53-29. They were the first seed in the East. They had the fourth best defense. They were literally one Jimmy Butler pull-up three away. Their defense, on the other hand, is elite. Trey had a terrible series. The Miami Heat that might have actually taken a step back. Yes, he lost PJ Tucker. So who's actually going to be my X factor? So that's going to be fun.
I want my damn respect too.
We back with the best team in the Eastern Conference last season, the Miami Heat. So the Heat were the best team in the East last season, but I think that they might be one of the teams that might have actually taken a step back going into next season. Their main weakness the Heat had last season was shot creation. The bad news is they did not exactly address it. They did not make moves to improve roster-wise. In fact, they actually lost PJ Tucker, leaving their front court rotation kind of weak. Teams like Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia are going to be better roster-wise compared to last season, and the rest of the Eastern Conference did definitely get better. However, the Heat got worse. Their best offseason move was basically just re-signing Victor Oladipo. It's obvious he's not as great as Indiana Oladipo, but defensively, I think he's still pretty good, especially as a point-of-attack defender. He can still shoot, dribble, pass, defend. So his arsenal of skills will definitely help, especially going into the playoffs. Now, he was technically on the team last season, so the team didn't exactly improve with this re-signing, but it's a good move by the team. They also drafted the tall wing forward with the 27th pick, a dude named Nikola Jovic. This is not Jokic, this is Jovic, but the jokes are going to be flying next season, so that's going to be fun. Even though he's a rookie, generally rookies don't play meaningful minutes on a title contending team, but he might end up getting minutes after losing PJ Tucker, and he seems to have a good skill set on both sides of the court. Coach Erik Spoelstra, to me, I believe that he's a top 3 coach in the league, and he's got a track record that makes me think he's going to maximize Jovic's skill set from the get-go. Now, enough about the summer. Let's quickly look at how the Heat season went last season. They went 53-29. They were the first seed in the East. They ended up losing in the Eastern Conference Finals to the Celtics. They were literally one Jimmy Butler pull-up three away from pushing Game 7 to overtime. They had the 4th best defense in their regular season, and they had the 12th best offense. On offense, they run one of the most diverse offenses in the league. The two main strengths of their offense is basically dribble handoffs and off-screen actions. They run a ton of dribble handoffs, especially with Bam in the high post and at the top of the key. That way, guards can get handoffs and their defenders will have to fight over screens because of the shooting ability of the Heat guards, like say Gabe Vincent, Kyle Lowry, Tyler Hero. Those same players can also get downhill. If Bam's defender ends up dropping back to guard the drive, Bam can definitely take advantage of the mismatch. What's also really cool about the Heat offense is that non-bigs, like say Lowry, Jimmy Butler, they do a ton of screening in the offense to get advantages for the team, but especially for Bam. The Heat as a whole don't run much isolations. They rank 20th in ISO possessions. Jimmy Butler as a player, on the other hand, runs a ton of ISOs, especially because he can take advantage of mismatches. He was an average ISO scorer in the regular season and in the playoffs, around the 77th percentile in scoring, so that's just alright. Outside of Butler's isolations, the reason the Heat use a lot of dribble handoffs and off-screen actions is mainly because the team lacks shot creators. Only Jimmy can consistently create his own shot. Keyword consistently. They have players that can take advantage of mismatches in spots like Lowry, Gabe Vincent, Hero, but they weren't consistent enough game to game, and that showed in the playoffs at times. Tyler Hero is definitely capable of it. I just don't know why they don't take more advantage of his offensive skill set. Because the team overall isn't great at attacking mismatches, they have to run sets to get their players advantages. That's why even with a great coach in Spoelstra, they had the 12th best offense. In dribble handoffs, they were 2nd in frequency and 4th in efficiency. So they ran a ton of dribble handoffs and were really good at scoring out of them. The best defense to neutralize this though would be just to switch. That's why they struggled against teams like Boston, Toronto, who love to switch on defense. Their other strength on offense was off-screen offense. where they ran the third most off-screen possessions per game and scored the second most points off those possessions. So they really lean into their strengths to score. Another positive in their offense is the slow, grinding pace that they play at. They were the third slowest paced team in the league, which is probably, I guess, due to age on the roster, but that also helps in terms of preparing for the playoffs. You can tell their lack of shot creation was real because they were not good at the best half-court set, the pick and roll. They ranked 22nd in pick and roll possessions per game and 11th in efficiency, so pick and roll is just not their thing really. So it's primarily dribble handoffs, off-screen actions, and post-ups really where they are really excelling at, most of which can technically be neutralized by a good switching defense. So I'm already a little concerned, but that's their offense. Their defense, on the other hand, is elite. They themselves are a switch-heavy defense. There are definitely downsides to switching though. It gives up offensive rebounds, putbacks, and it also creates mismatches for the other team. The advantage is it saves energy, doesn't wear out players, doesn't make players fight over screens, which is useful in the playoffs where attrition is a real thing, and especially when you have a little bit of an older roster like the Heat have. Bam Adebayo, he's the foundation of their switching defense. He's not as good of a rim protector like Giannis or Rudy Gobert, but I actually think he's better at switching out to the perimeter than that. He's more mobile and has better feet at the perimeter. But he can technically still protect the rim and switch out to the perimeter. By the way, don't forget to check out my video on Bam. The link's going to be in the description. I talk more specifically about Bam's defense. But when you have a switching defense, it stagnates the offense, it neutralizes their offensive sets. Once you neutralize the pick and roll, it turns the offense into a isolation offense, which is much more easier to guard. A prime example of how effective the Heat were was in the first round of the playoffs versus the Hawks. Bam would switch out onto Trae Young, neutralizing the advantages created in the Trae Young-Clint Capella pick and roll. At that point, Trae had to isolate on Bam, which slowed down the Hawks offense, and I can confidently say that the Heat straight up clamped Trae Young. Trae had a terrible series. He literally averaged 15 points per game on 37% effective field goal percentage. That is just gross. Outside of Bam, the Heat roster has multiple other players that can thrive when switched out of position, like say Kyle Lowry, Max Strus. The roster and the head coach is very well suited for this style of defense. They also run a very aggressive defense. This is the main difference between them, the Heat, and maybe a team like the Bucks. Heat, they attack ball handlers. They get underneath them, they're digging down, and they scored the 7th most points off turnovers. Even though their offense wasn't exactly top tier, their defense supplements their offense by getting easy buckets in transition. That covers up their bad half-court offense by being aggressive, getting turnovers, and switching and slowing down the opponent's half-court offense. So the Heat, they are an excellent defensive team. They're built for the playoffs. Offensively, they use a ton of sets to scheme and create advantages for their players that aren't exactly great at creating their own advantage. And the main weakness is that they struggle against teams that have defenses that can clog up their own sets by switching everything. So when they get forced into shot creation, that's not the Miami Heat's strength. The only player that has helped overcome that huge weakness is Jimmy Butler, but Butler is getting older. They need someone to step up, take some of that huge burden that he's been carrying on his shoulders. Now, let's quickly just kind of go over their depth chart for next season. At guard, they have Lowry, Victor Oladipo, Tyler Hero, Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent, Max Strus. That's a great guard rotation. At wing, they have Jimmy Butler, Duncan Robinson, and the rookie Nikola Jovic. And in their front court, they obviously have Bam, as well as Dwayne Dedmon and Omer Yurtseven. So I love their guard rotation. It's solid. It's got a good mix of shooting, defense, playmaking, but they're very thin at forward and big, which is kind of weird because the league is heading towards taller ball handling wings as the future of the game. And here the Heat are with a bunch of smaller guards and thinner depth at the wing and the 5 spot. Alright, moving on from the bad vibes this video is going to suddenly, let's look towards the future. Let's talk about some more positive things. Let's look at their best case scenario for next season. Best case scenario, if Jimmy can play to his best, his peak stays healthy, the Heat can technically beat the best teams in the league in the playoffs. If the rest of the team is healthy, they are definitely contenders and they have the experience and the coaching to get back into the finals. That's, I think, their best case scenario. Worst case scenario is the threat of injuries to their aging roster. Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry both kind of broke down in the playoffs. They lost PJ Tucker, which I don't think the team has actually addressed roster-wise, and they're technically one severe injury away from a first-round exit or even worse, especially if that injury is to maybe one of Lowry, Butler, or Bam Adebayo. So who's actually going to be my X factor, the player that can actually change the fate of the Heat next season? To me, it's Tyler Hero. He needs to take that leap as a shot creator. He was assisted on 41% of his shots last season. 71% of his threes were assisted. It's not that he can't create his own shot off the dribble, he just doesn't do it enough. At least not enough to take the burden off Jimmy in the playoffs. In the regular season, he averaged 21 points per game on 56% true shooting. These are, I don't want to underrate these numbers. These are great numbers. These are solid, efficient numbers, especially for a bench player, even though as a bench player, he doesn't exactly play bench player minutes, but that's another conversation. The majority of his offense were in spot-up situations. He's awesome at attacking closeouts, but he's already a knockdown three-point shooter. He can pull up in the mid-range, he can get to the rim. He was in the 93rd percentile for spot-up possessions too. Problem was that he's just average or below average at everything else. Isolations, dribble handoffs, coming off screens. Anytime they ran plays for him, he was not as efficient. He thrived spotting up while others created advantages out of double teams. So he fits really well next to Bam and Jimmy Butler, but he was technically also a defensive liability. And I think that part is what's going to hold back the Heat. The defensive liability is not what the Heat need on the court. If the Heat can actually maximize Hero's offense and hide his defensive weaknesses even better than they technically have been doing so far, that might be all that's needed to get back into the finals. To me, the Heat are going to be a really good defensive team once again. The only question is their lack of offseason moves to improve the roster and the loss of PJ Tucker, of course, while other teams in the East, like the Celtics, Sixers, Cavs, they added and improved their rosters. It's tough for me to put the Heat over those teams and the Bucks and Giannis. So I think unless the Heat makes some sort of mid-season move, they might have actually been left behind in the race for the next Eastern Conference team to win the title. Toronto's 1-1, Milwaukee's 1-1, the race is still on. And if you want to watch a video about another team that's deep in the race, probably leading the race, check out this video on the Milwaukee Bucks.